Yeah. Here you go. Come here.
Are you trying to put it out?
No, I was trying to catch the other one.
Here you go.
You know what? I can't fit my
Do what?
I can't fit my weight inside the
Thank you.
Got some food.
straws.
Nothing better than black box.
Finest.
Tradition! To our agreement! To our prosperity! To good health and happiness! And most important, to life, l'chaim! L'chaim, to life! Here's to the father I've tried to be. Here's to my bride to be. Drink l'chaim, to life, l'chaim! L'chaim, to life. Life has a way of confusing us, blessing and bruising us. Drink l'chaim to life. God would like us to be joyful, even when our hearts lie melting on the floor. How much more can we be joyful when there's really something to be joyful for? To life, l'chaim. To disciple my daughter, my wife. It gives you something to think about, something to drink about. Drink l'chaim to life.
Drinks for everybody! What's the occasion?
I am taking myself a bride.
Who is it?
Tevye's eldest, Simon.
Thank you to the person who actually paid for dinner for everyone. So that person is anonymous, so just be thankful. The money you pay towards tickets or whatever, that's all going towards the endowment, and we'll talk about the endowment a little more later. The Courier did a really big story about the Art Center. This came out this week, and they left us 150 copies of the paper. If anyone wants a hard copy of the paper, they're in the lobby. So thank you to the Courier. Thank you to Donna Williams for arranging this great meal. So, Sue Conley, who couldn't be here tonight, arranged for the flowers and our lovely banner that will be up for the year. And what are the other 100 things I need to say thank you for? Shore Mountain Cultures for amazing desserts, and you know, they do that stuff all the time. I'm really glad you're all able to be here so we could be together, but also to see the theater that's been happening for 40 years in this small town, and 30 years now we've had this amazing building. We just finished the 5th addition to the building, and that was the classroom. So that's a huge step for us, and we'll talk more about that too later tonight. Let's see, whatever I'm forgetting, I'll remember later. There's 5 people who are going to speak, and they're all going to talk for about 5 minutes each. And again, keep hanging out. There's more food, there's more dessert, coffee's there if you need that. And okay, Richard Northcutt's our first speaker tonight.
Well, I'm going to try to keep it to 5 minutes, and because of that, I've sort of prepared and written out some remarks so that I don't forget things. But I want to congratulate the board and the staff of the Art Center on this occasion tonight. It's always great to remember and preserve your history and to honor your roots and to celebrate all of the thousands, literally thousands of people who have made this evening possible. Neil wanted me to talk about the story of the Arts Center. The story of the Arts Center is the story of people. And as I reflected on what I was going to say to you tonight, and I hope I can make it through it, I want to talk about a few of those people. It's impossible to mention everybody, but there are some that have been on my mind a great deal. And I want to talk about those people for a minute. Morris Parker. Morris was a wonderful friend, a brilliant architect, and an artist. Morris designed the original Art Center, and I think most, if not all, of the additions. And he was a native of Cannon County and had an extraordinary knowledge of the history of Cannon County. And when we approached him with the idea of building an art center in Cannon County, he was, of course, more than glad to help us out, donate his services. But I have to tell you, he was extremely skeptical that an art center would ever work in Cannon County. And when he showed us his first drawings, he said, now, here, this big door here, this is where the cattle can come in. This part's going to be the show ring, and this is where the cattle go out, just in case you ever need to turn this into a livestock sale barn. I'm so glad he had a backup plan. Larry Richards, another great friend, a law partner, advisor, sounding board, shoulder to cry on, mentor. Larry always took great pleasure in telling people that if it weren't for him, there wouldn't be a community playhouse or an art center. And he would go on to explain that when I talked to him about that and the ideas about starting a community theater and then later on the art center, he said, well, you know, Richard, I just don't think that's going to work. I just don't think it's going to work. And he would go on then to say that I knew that if I told him that, it would make him mad enough that he'd do anything to prove me right. And I think he was right about that. Bill Smith. Bill Smith. When I think of the word champion, I always think of Bill Smith. Bill was one of the greatest cheerleaders Cannon County ever had and probably ever will have. He was also a visionary. If anything was good for Cannon County, he was always behind it. He was the first one to step up, to volunteer. He was the first one to contribute. And as most of you probably know, he gave the land for the Art Center. And my recollection is we didn't even have to ask him for it. He volunteered a pretty valuable piece of property for us to build the Art Center and the many additions that have gone on. And it's just hard to underestimate his contribution to the Art Center. And so we are here tonight, I think, standing very, very firmly on the very broad and generous shoulders of Bill Smith. Wilma. Don't need to say anything else. Wilma. You know, there's only one, and she was one of a kind. In the early days, whenever I would send out a call for help on a set or working on a production or whatever, she was always one of the first responders. A lot of times it was just me and Wilma working, and I can remember setting her to paint a set. I mean, you know, put some paint on that flat over there, Wilma, and she would go over there and she'd put the paint on the flat, and I would follow behind her with a stippling brush or splattering paint or doing whatever. And she'd say, yeah, what are you doing? And I would say, well, Wilma, that's a scene painting technique to make things look old. And she said, I don't even help doing that. And she also taught me the proper way, the Wilma Adams way, of how to wring out a wet towel. I didn't know that until Wilma saw me wringing out a towel one day, and she said, no, let me show you how to do that. And so now I know how the proper way to do that. And years ago, when we were having an evening much like this, and we were dedicating the cultural part to Bill Smith and the theater to Wilma Adams, Wilma pulled me aside and said, you know, your name is the one that ought to be up there. And I said, Wilma, without you and Bill, there wouldn't be a wall here to put a name on. And I still firmly believe that. I really miss those people. They enriched my life beyond measure. And so many of you as well. But every time I walk into the Art Center, I feel their presence, and it comforts me. Happily, there are some people here tonight who are still with us. That I want to say a little bit about. Another great friend, Arlen Indy. Before Arlen heard the siren call of Swanee, she was a longtime resident of Cannon County. Tremendous artist, she and Jack. I'm sure many of you know them and know their work. But Arlen was early on instrumental in the campaign to build the Art Center. And an executive director of the Art Center, and very, very important in much of the programming that has become a part of the Art Center. Now, I don't know if most of you know, but craft artists tend to march to the beat of a different drummer. And when we were trying to get the craft artists in this county involved in the Art Center, it was not an easy thing to do, believe me. There was a lot of skepticism and in some cases hostility. But in her own graceful and intelligent and quiet way, Arlen went about convincing our craft artists here to join in this effort, and that has made a great difference. She has done a great deal to help us preserve and perpetuate the great craft artist tradition in Cannon County. All right, thank you. And one of the best kept secrets of the Art Center is Christine Dillon. Christine was always the fiscal and financial conscience of this Art Center from the time we were at the Playhouse until we were starting to build the Art Center and the campaign to do the Art Center. I believe that she was the single most influential individual in selling the idea of the Art Center and in raising the money and getting people to open their wallets to contribute to something they couldn't see. That was a difficult task, and she carried it out. She was relentless in a good way, very good way. We owe her so much for being here tonight. And she continued on, holding our feet to the financial fire. WWCD, what would Christine do? Believe me, when there became a financial issue early on in the Art Center, that was the question everybody asked. And it stood us in good stead because it made us step back and reflect that we were always using the funds people contributed in the way they meant for them to be used, and I think we did that, and it's mostly because of Christine. Darrell Deason, in the late 70s, early mid 70s, out of dental school looking for a place to start his dental practice, and lucky for us, he chose Woodbury. He had had some experience in forensics and theater in his native Shelbyville, and when he got wind of the plans and the ideas and the thoughts of bringing a community theater to Woodbury, he was the first one up. And for 40 years, he has stayed the course, and he's never looked back. His camaraderie was invaluable. His enthusiasm, infectious, sometimes scary, but always there. And finally, I want to talk just a minute about my parents. Dude and Annie. A lot of you, some of you knew Dude and Annie. And among the many life lessons that my sisters and I learned from them, probably the most valuable was community. They taught us that when the community does well, you do well. When the community takes a hit, you take a hit. You have to make the sacrifices necessary to get the community and yourself through that hit. For all that the community gives you, you have to give back in equal measure. You have to use your resources and your talent to help the community thrive. And in looking back and in trying to incorporate that lesson, I thought, what talents do I have to offer? And I'd always been interested in the arts, probably due to the influence of a great man named Burton McFerrin. And so I thought, well, maybe that's something that I can bring to the community. And that was sort of the genesis of the beginning of the community playhouse. And in closing, I'd just like to say to the board of the Art Center and to the staff, learn from the past, but don't live in it. Constantly challenge yourself and your audience. Do not fear failure, because that's often the greatest teacher. And finally, dream. Dream, as you never know what that dream can become.
Sue Williams, where are you? Would you stand up for just a second? Sue Williams is a basket maker, a white oak basket maker. She's our white oak basket maker. And Sue made that case happen. The case that displays our collection, a collection that talks about the history of Cannon County. Sue works tirelessly to make sure that we'll continue to be basket makers. She just received the Governor's Award for her work on that, and a couple of people I want to acknowledge being here. Mayor Duggan, thank you for being here. Corey Davenport, one of our elected commissioners. There are multiple other elected officials here. Why don't you all stand up? You're all kind of sitting together. Chef Anthony was our caterer tonight. He did an amazing job, and we're really lucky to have had him here tonight. Short Mountain Distillery and Billy Kaufman, thank you for contributing your product for everyone to have a taste of if they were interested. Shannon Ford is with the Tennessee Arts Commission. He's someone we've been working with for quite a while now. He helps us stay in business. He helps us know what's going on around the state. Thank you for being here, Shannon. Sitting at the back table is Renee Berger and Sandy Berger. I think everyone in this room knows them by name, but probably has never met them. They're probably not going to want to stand up, but they are going to stand up because I'm asking across the room. Thank you for coming from New York City to be with us tonight. And, okay, back to speakers. Marianne Smith, where are you?
I'm not used to having this kind of mic. Why do I have to talk after Richard? People say that they love their home theater. But this place, it's not my home theater. It's my home. My first connection with the Art Center of Canyon County, or Canyon Community Playhouse, was in 1982. I was 8 years old. And even before that, my mother, Dean Barker, and my aunts, Wilma Adams, Gladys Hayes, and Drunell Higgins, were involved in getting the first productions onto this stage. Our family has always loved to perform, and now they finally had a stage to perform on. The first musical we did here was Sound of Music. And I remember as an 8-year-old shoveling coal out of the basement of the old gym. And let me tell you, those pictures do not do justice. That was hard work, even for an 8-year-old. But we were all working here together, making a theater. And our family gave a lot of time, and my daughter, Wilma, she was fortunate enough to be able to give more than just her time. Now, everybody knew Wilma and Gladys. They were the box office ladies. They sold tickets here in this new building until they put in a computer. And at that point, Wilma said, "No, I'm not fooling with that." And that was the end of the box office ladies. My family has always been close, and we've always loved to sing. So we were always in the musicals. And they have sung everything from Latin in Sound of Music to a Martha White flower in Hills of Home. We are multi-talented. But no one truly knows how much fun we've had here at the Art Center. Our family has loved being here together, and this place has given us another outlet to do that. Because of the Art Center, I have found another family. We may not be related by blood, but we're family. Richard and Daryl. Y'all have taught me so much. They taught me that I can be anybody I want to be, and even people I didn't think I wanted to be. Who would have thought that I would do Shakespeare? How many times have I been a nun? I have flown, I've been a boy, and been dropped out of the air by my uncle, and that was just one show. I still, to this day, get recognized as Peter Pan, and that was a long time ago. I have directed, I have stage managed, I have been a music director, I've been a producer, I've done makeup, I've sold tickets, I've done lights and sound, I have worked here, I have even starred in some of the plays, and I've loved every minute of it. The best part is I met my husband here. We worked so well together that it equipped us to do our jobs today. Matt and I both teach theater at Riverdale High School. And now we have taken our love for theater and we try to pass it on to young people. Sometimes we shove it in their face, but we pass it on. And we even send the good ones here to audition. Only the good ones. The Art Center is where I can always see my friends and family. All I have to do is walk in the door. Richard, you had no idea what kind of monster you were creating when you created the Canyon Community Playhouse. And Daryl, bless him, he became part of our family just by casting all of us crazy people in Sound of Music. So thank you for allowing this short little 8-year-old who couldn't say her R's, so I was Gweddle. I got bitten by the acting bug, along with the rest of my family. Now, 20 years ago when we did this, I held the record for being on stage more than anybody else. I don't know that I do that anymore, but I hope you can see why. This is my home. Thank you.
Who's been on staff here or is on staff? Stand up. Just, you need to be recognized.
It's hard to know where to begin because I look around and I see so many friends, so many people from the years that started out with dirt. This was just all dirt. And I thought, how can we raise money to get this started, get it going? For one thing, my good friend Morris Head Parker jumped right in as the architect. But before him even, I still have this canvas that's about 10 or 12 feet that says, "Dig for the Arts." And when this was dirt, some of you may remember, we went around to all the merchants in Woodbury and they donated objects and gifts, and the hardware store lent us some shovels, and we buried all these pieces in that dirt. And then we charged, I think it was $10 a ticket or $10 a shovel. And with the idea of digging for the arts, that was the theme of our first real fundraiser here. And I think we've been digging ever since. we've all of you who have done so much over the years bring whatever little legacy I have in this beautiful picture, including those tapestries, which I did with the quilt makers in mind. We did a directory so that the quilt makers and the basket makers could find their market. The market, I had already found them. Pickers came from all over to buy those beautiful baskets and quilts and take them off to New York or San Francisco and sell them for 10 times the price they paid for them. So the idea arose that we needed to give those craft makers their market right here. And so we create. I left it at home. I'm sorry. I could have shown it to you. I think Karen Zabriskie has another copy of it down there. But I went around to all the crafts makers, and the stories were incredible. Why they, some of them wouldn't sell their work because there were complications with Social Security, or they were very inward. But the idea that somebody wanted to help them find their market really brought them out in full. And I did those tapestries based on some of the favorite quilt patterns that the local workers used. And I remember one of the tellers told me once, she said, you can't imagine how many people come into the bank, now this is Bill Smith's bank, and tell people, well, that pattern is the one I use, or oh, look what she did with my pattern here. And it was just, to me, that is what community is all about. You give what you know how to do, and you bring people together. And we're here tonight because of all this that went before us. Every one of you has contributed to this. I thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk, but I love everybody who's here, and those of you that I haven't seen in a long time. It's unbelievable.
I also want to thank Robert Hires, who was playing in the classroom earlier. All the visual artists in the room, please stand up so you get recognized, please. We're so much a theater, but we're really not just a theater, and that often gets overlooked. So there are potters in the room, there are painters in the room, there's a basket maker in the room. Donald Fan, where are you?
You have asked me to talk about arts education tonight. There's one thing I've learned in about 30 years of dealing with community arts organizations. All community arts is arts education. For those of you who don't know me, I grew up in Bryson, which is about halfway between Woodbury and Allentown. Wasn't much to do up there, so I spent an inordinate amount of time throwing rocks in ponds. When you throw a rock in a pond, especially a small pond, the ripples from that go out to the edge of the pond, and then they start to come back in. And they go out and they come back in. And if you throw a couple rocks in at various places, they start to make these really interesting geometric patterns on the surface as they're moving and interacting with each other. Here in the last few years, that's how I've started thinking about community arts and arts education, the ripples in a pond. Because you never know how they're going to interact or how they're going to change something. The work we do sometimes accidentally drops a rock in the pond. You don't know where that ripple's going to go. But if you're intentional about it, if you're creative about it, you can do work that intentionally throws things out. And you still don't always know where it's going to go, but you can plan it a little more. There's a couple of qualities to that work that I want to talk about before we jump into the specifics of arts education. That work should be challenging. It should be authentic. It should be grounded in the cultural context of the community. And it should be innovative. It should change the way that people think about their lives and the artwork in their lives. About 40 years ago, somebody, or maybe longer than that, somebody threw a rock in a pond and one of the ripples hit Richard Northcutt. And he came up with this wild hair of an idea to start Cannon Community Playhouse, which would become the Art Center of Cannon County. A couple of years later, Darrell Deason threw a rock in a pond at Cannon County High School, and one of those ripples hit a 16-year-old boy who would come to devote his life to the arts. The first time I remember having any idea of how the arts and education interacted was 1986, when they shipped off the juniors and seniors at Cannon County High School to see 1776 in a school matinee show. Now, there's no reason in the world that anybody should have thought that you could do a school matinee show in a community theater, right? But education had been a core of this organization since its beginning. By 1994, there was in place a school matinee series which every student in Cannon County saw 2 plays a year. Now, when I first started writing grants, Cannon County was what we call an underserved area. And the funny thing about the word underserved is spell check doesn't recognize it. It changes it to undeserved. And I always thought that was kind of fitting, because typically in underserved areas, people don't think they deserve something. They think it's undeserved. And those school matinee programs changed the lives of students, and it changed the audience at the Art Center. If the first theater you experienced was at a school matinee, can you stand up? Anybody out here for that? Nobody? Okay. You got one? Okay. At its height, the school matinee series was serving 20,000 students a year. And on the cutting edge of arts education materials. We were sending out multicolored pieces to every student that came to see it. It was based on a Kennedy Center model. Sometime in the early 80s, a man named Jay Kinney in Memphis, Tennessee, at Playhouse on the Square, threw a rock in a pond. And by 1995, that ripple had come all the way to Woodbury, Tennessee. And we started the Summer Youth Conservatory. It was a summer program that was based in experiential arts education. It was focused on challenging, it focused on critical thinking, creative writing, visual imagery. This past year was the 25th Summer Youth Conservatory. I spent the last few days thinking about this ripples in the pond idea and reached out to some former students. And there's lots of really personal stories about how they changed and how it changed individual lives. One of my favorites is a lady named Lauren Person, who now is an elementary school teacher at East Side in Bedford County. And she told me that the first time she could remember understanding what voiced and unvoiced consonants were in the warm-up that we did at the conservatory. That's not necessarily an arts impact, but it's an impact on a student that becomes a teacher that impacts other people. And an inordinate number of those students from the Summer Youth Conservatory have become artists or educators, or sometimes arts educators. And so those impacts and the impacts of those students we'll see for years to come. In 1999, the rock that Richard threw in the pond here reached all the way to Selmer, Tennessee. There's an organization there. If you don't know, Selmer, Tennessee is the home of Buford Pusser from Walkin' Tall and his 2x4, right? Selmer, Tennessee was about as unlikely a place as Woodbury, Tennessee for an arts organization to thrive. But Arts in McNary used the Art Center as a model to build a an organization that has become their own model now. And so if you go to Crockett County, Tennessee, they'll tell you that their arts organization is based on Arts in McNair. All these rocks, all these intersecting ripples. As we gained a great deal of success at the Art Center, inevitably there would be people come in excited about what we were doing. And they would tell us how innovative we were and how different we were as an arts organization. And we'd put them on the board, and once they got on the board, they'd say, all right, now, all this is nice and cute and quaint, but this is the way you really ought to do things. And after those board meeting where that had happened, Bill Smith would always grab me by the arm. He'd say, Uncle Silas. He called me Uncle Silas. It was my great-great-grandfather. He said, Uncle Silas, they knew not Joseph. I don't know if you know that reference or not. It's from the first chapter of Exodus. And it's right after Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat segment of the Bible, right? And early it says, there arose a man who knew not Joseph. And what Bill meant there was, these people didn't know where we came from. They didn't know the qualities that made this organization what it is. The success of the Art Center over the last 40 years is by and large by understanding who Joseph is and how we got here. And also 40 years of throwing rocks in the pond where the ripples are still going and the rocks are still going in.
Daryl Deasy, would you do us the honor, sir?
1968, there was a 14-year-old boy in Shelbyville, Tennessee, with an alcoholic mother, a workaholic father that had multiple affairs, that decided they could no longer take care of their child. And they sent him to another family to live for about a year and a half. That 14-year-old boy discovered theater in Shelbyville, Tennessee, and they became my family. And from 1968 until 1980, theater was my life. It was my family. It was all I knew. People that really knew me and that were very close to me knew I was going to dental school and said, oh my gosh, what if this guy graduates from dental school and goes to a town that doesn't have a theater? And somebody said he'll start his own. I didn't have to do that. That I hadn't been in this town but 2 months till I saw a little ad in the paper that Richard Northcutt, of anyone interested in starting a theater. I called him 563-5206. I told him I had a little bit of experience. Ran into him at a Lions Club meeting that I think it was the very first time I attended. And he comes up to me and says, I'm Richard Northcutt, you want to be vice president? And then along with Connie Bryan. And Connie, were you secretary? I don't know. Richard, I learned so much from you. Guys, and Larry was so key in all of this, but Richard knew how to put together a board of directors. Bill Smith, Christine Dillon, Wilma Adams, Austin Jennings, Dr. Robert Mason. Richard had them categorized. This is what they bring to the board, and this is what we have to have. And he knew exactly what he was doing and how in the world we were going to put this together. I learned set design from him. I learned organizational skills from him. The vision that he brought and was able to give to this community, and all he'd have to do is give an idea, and I'd say, well, what about this, and what about this, and we just went on, and idea after idea, and I can remember when you, Donald, and I, we would sit, and we were like the trifecta. And the rules of the trifecta was only 2 people had to be for it. We didn't care about the third one. And that's how we made things work. I've built seasons for 39 years. I looked over there. I guess I've directed at least 49 shows. I couldn't have done it with the wonderful support of my wife and my family and my daughter, who I believe is the best director in Middle Tennessee. And there's just a few names. I've heard the stories, and I just have to share a few more names with you. Dr. Robert Mason. He sat on that board and thought, why in the world am I here? He had not a clue what he brought to this organization. And then when Richard convinced him to be in Mornings at 7, and he was the character, one of the finest, best first productions we ever did. And Austin Jennings, Richard knew of the influence and the intelligence and what this man knew about the world, and his community service all over this world, and what he could bring to this organization for that. Donald, you talk about the arts education. I can remember sitting in a Tennessee Theater Association conference, and it was a panel, and I got up to speak, and I told them about our arts education program for a community theater, and everybody looked at me and said, you can't do that. And I said, yes, we can. And we have a director of schools by the name of Nell Smith that made sure absolutely every child in this county got there. And the buses and transportation was completely paid for back then, guys. The kids didn't pay for the buses. She made sure that the Cannon County school system took care of the buses, and that's how we were able to do it. So many people, I know that I'm leaving out. I thought of a story driving up here that there we were in that little bitty basement of the gym, and we were doing Tea House of the August Moon. And I don't know if I knew that we were starting to make a name in Middle Tennessee. I don't know if I gathered that yet. But all of a sudden, I started getting calls from dentists in Murfreesboro wanting to know if I could get them tickets. And I thought, Richard, I think we've got something here. And we did. And we do.
Amen.
Yes. That theater family, I'll share this and then I'll go. That theater family that I experienced in Shelbyville, Tennessee, I made a commitment to my Lord and Savior that if He would let me get into dental school, that I would share that family for the rest of my life. And I've tried to do that. And this theater and this community has done that in so many ways, and the ripple effect is incredible. Thank you.
So I was director here for 4 years, and you spend maybe 7 days a week in this building when you're the director. And there's never-ending wonderful work to do, and I met hundreds, if not really thousands of people while working here. And you spend a lot of time in this building. You know every corner of it, and you know how it's used, and you know how it needs to be used, and what are the future possibilities. And one of the things that we talked through was how do we have a proper classroom in this building? We are about education in so many ways. So while raising money for a lot of other purposes, we paid off the mortgage the other year, or a couple of years ago, or a year ago, 29 years early. Tim Spry was on the board, was board president, so basically Tim hired me, and we talked about the amount of money that was needed, and so we threw around the number $500,000, which miraculously we raised in about 3 years. What Tim also said was, maybe we'll wind up with some extra, and maybe that will get us going in the direction of sustainability and setting up an endowment. And so we started doing that also at the same time. And then how do we use this building? How do we need to use this building in the future? And that's how the classroom happened. So, the $500,000 goal wound up generating $900,000. We refurbished the building, we started the endowment, and we had the money we needed to build the classroom. Multiple donors towards that project are in the room. I won't single them out. Their names are on the wall, but they are in this room, and they are a great part of this family. The classroom has Austin Jennings' name, as well as the practice rooms have Burton Dye's name and Diane Dye's name. I don't know where Burton and Diane are. Some very quiet, very thoughtful people. So if you get a chance to say hello to them, please say hello to Burton and Diane. But the classroom is named after Michael Jennings. I blew it. After Austin Jennings. I'd like Michael Jennings to come up and talk a little bit about his dad, and there are some photos of his family. So here's Dr. Jennings for us.
I have to follow all these professional actors and artists. I'm very honored to be here tonight. My father grew up, like most people in Woodbury in that era, in very simple circumstances. He was no connoisseur of the arts. Arts was really hardly in their vocabulary. Yet the county was filled with artisans, basket makers, chair and furniture makers, the quilt makers. These were not considered art at the time. They were just the articles of ordinary daily life. But over time, I think we and the world began to really appreciate the talent that went into these great works. And my dad was no connoisseur of the arts. He could sing if there was a big enough bucket to carry the tune in. I think he acted in one high school play in a minor role. But he had great appreciation for those who could perform those arts. There's a tremendous pool of talent here in Cannon County. Their vocal talent is not limited to those who are on the stage, but it's something that people do here every Sunday at church. I think the Francis family were well known for their performances at numerous funerals and other occasions around the county. Yet we don't really think of them as artists. They are just singing. Well, the Arts Center has been able to pull that talent out of the hills and hollers and teach the performing arts in a formal way that can be presented to the public in these wonderful plays and musicals that have entertained and thrilled so many people over these 40 years. My dad really appreciated all the talent in this county. He was very proud to be of Cannon County origins. One of his favorite sayings was when someone asked him, "Have you lived in Cannon County all your life?" And he would answer, "Not yet." He succeeded in making that happen. We are really honored to have a new addition to the Arts Center named in his memory that would have meant so much to him, making him very proud. I especially want to thank the Berger sisters for their major contribution and for their being here tonight. Thank you.
The Historical Society contributed to the construction of this part of the facility, and I just want to publicly thank them for that. So, Mr. Bush, wherever you are, raise your hand, give us a little wave. They're an integral part of this neighborhood. He's somewhere in the room, hopefully so. Okay. The evening's almost over as far as this part of it. There's plenty of dessert. Please eat more dessert. When we raised the funds we needed to get this place to a point where we really believed in its future long term, it was moving to the point of where can we function and run this place from a position of abundance and not from scarcity. There's, better than $100,000 of the community foundation in our endowment now. The goal is $1 million, and we're going to get there. We've gotten this far. We'd like to stay in business for the next 40 years. I think there's a place for us. There's a place for this giant family that I wasn't a part of until 2013, and it's been really an honor. I've been saying that a lot tonight. It's been great to be included and to be able to participate and contribute. And we're all part of this thing, and let's just keep doing it and grow this family as best we can. So I don't have any great conclusion other than thank you for being here tonight. Please stay, please talk to everyone around you. You're all part of the arts scene in Middle Tennessee and across this state, and it's important. It's part of every day, and we need it. So thank you for being here, and we'll do this again someday.